Witches and Wands, The Well of Whispers, written by SquishableMoon, Chapter 1. Every child born into a house of witches will be sent 3 letters upon their first birthday. The first letter is a deep purple, a congratulatory letter filled with all the affectioning a governing council can give, often sent with flowers and small balloons. The second letter, a flat and dull gray, was a reminder to fill out all of the important paperwork for both the human government and, of course, the Council of Governing Witches and Warlocks. It was very important to keep all papers in order, especially when you must fill out 2 sets of every document. The last letter, a mossy green with tinted edges and a beautiful gold stamp to close it. The front was signed with gold calligraphy and was one of the most important and exciting letters anyone could receive. An invitation to a prestigious school every witchlock must attend to learn magic and rules before being set loose into the wide world. A small gift came with the letters, a small box with a white ribbon. Inside a rough stone as ordinary as any rock you'd find outside your door. To the everyday people, or as most witchlets called them, the duds, would nearly bat an eye to the dull stone in the box, its roughed edges and flat color leaving more than enough to be imagined or wanted. Unlike its appearance, the stone was a vessel and would be carried alongside the child until their adolescence. This little stone would be the first gift the child would receive, as is common practice and tradition. The letter would be saved until such a time the child would start to show their talents for magic, at which they would be allowed to attend the school the following year. About 8:30, a wicker basket sat on top of a stoop and in front of a large stained blue door. It was the last house on the street, their road ending in a curve of the road and continued back and out again. Fresh bread poked out from cloth covering it, the surface crisp and brown. "The bread was dropped off, Mom," Chloe chirped, opening the door to her home, the white mailing bus driving behind her to its next destination. The foyer held long shelves echoing family portraits of vacations and happy times. "Mom? Dad? Anyone home?" Chloe asked, poking her head inside. A burst of cold air met her skin, forcing away the Texas summer heat. Walking inside, she made her way to the kitchen, setting the bread down on the counter before looking through the mail in her hand. A commotion came behind her, and 2 large hands covered her eyes.
"Guess who?"
A deep but familiar voice called, the warmth in their voice only adding to the sudden surprise. "Dad, your hands are sweaty!" Chloe laughed, pulling the 2 hands from her eyes.
"Wait, keep your eyes closed,"
her dad said, keeping his hands firmly planted over her eyes. "What have you done now, Dad?" Chloe asked, rolling her eyes with a small smile.
"Just keep those peepers shut,"
her dad said, turning her body to face him and walking away. She could hear the giggling and patter of feet on the wood floor before returning in front of her. Chloe laughed to herself, shaking her head. Her parents had always been odd and loved to surprise her with more than she could ever want.
"All right, open them,"
said her dad.
"Surprise!
Happy birthday, sweetheart!"
2 voices chimed together, and a bursting of confetti popped wildly in front of Chloe's face. Her parents, holding a large and colorful box, stood excitedly in front of her. Her mom must have snuck inside when her father had covered her eyes and was gleefully waiting for Chloe to see the gift they had carefully prepared. "You know my birthday isn't until tomorrow, right?" Chloe said, not able to keep the smile from creeping onto her face.
"No, did we get the date wrong? I guess you won't be wanting the gift then,"
Chloe's mom sang, placing the box softly inside Chloe's embrace. The top was loosely open, not being fully tied shut with its ribbon. Inside, the sound of soft scratching could be heard. Chloe gave her parents a curious look before slowly opening the top of the box. Inside the box, 2 small ears poked up, and 2 brown eyes stared back at Chloe. Chloe gasped, flicking her eyes to both of her parents in disbelief. "Oh my gosh, you guys didn't!"
We did!
Chloe's mom squealed, hopping in place with her hands tightly clasped.
We know how badly you wanted a pet chihuahua.
Chloe's dad puffed out his chest and crossed his arms, nodding his proud approval. "I have been asking for a puppy for so freaking long," Chloe said, putting her hands inside the box to touch the silky fur. A small puppy with big brown eyes, white fur, and 2 cute, sharp ears. "Hi, little one," Chloe cooed at the small puppy.
You'll know you'll have to clean up after
Her dad said sternly. "Take her for walks," Chloe's mom added. I know. I promise I'll treat her like my own child." Chloe groaned and slipped her hand in the box, lifting the small animal into her arms. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. I couldn't have asked for a better birthday gift," Chloe said, hugging her parents while cuddling the small puppy.
Oh, what are you gonna name her, sweetie?
Her mom asked sweetly. I'm not too sure," Chloe said, her eyebrows pushed together in thought. Her eyes focused on the spice rack. Many spices lined up, but one caught her eye. Her father's saffron, the one spice she was never allowed to touch. "Okay," lifting the small puppy up to her eyes, "your name is Saffron."
It's a jab at me, isn't it? Did you hear her, Miss Tuffin?
Chloe's dad tossed his body onto his wife in dramatic fashion, pretending to stab a dagger into his heart.
Oh, Mr. Tuffin, you should have let the girl use your special spice and this wouldn't have happened.
Mrs. Tuffin said. She held her husband dearly, pressing her forehead to his before dropping him on his face.
Abandoned by my own wife and child.
Mr. Tuffin thrusted his hand to his forehead, lying flat on the ground. Chloe rolled her eyes and giggled, watching the dramatic act of her father. "Dad!" Chloe asked, bending down to her father.
Yes, my sweetest pumpkin of my eye,
Mr. Tuffin said, turning his face to Chloe, only to be met with small licks from the dog Saffron.
Give me that puppy.
Using his hand, he pushed himself up to grab the puppy from Chloe. "No way, she's mine now," Chloe said, turning the puppy away, its small body curled up in her arms.
All right, you two, enough playing on the floor,
Mrs. Tuffin said, helping her husband off the floor before kissing him softly on the cheek.
Your father and I didn't just get you a puppy.
She said, leaning down to pet the puppy's white fur.
You'll find some more up in your room.
She winked before heading to the fridge to start breakfast. Without wasting a moment, Chloe made her way out of the kitchen and towards the staircase. Along the walls, there were small Halloween decorations already being hung. Her mother had started her warpath to taking over the house for the holidays again. Chloe held the puppy close to her, its little eyes drooping with sleep. Propping up its head, she made her way to her bedroom, being careful not to wake the sleeping pupper in her arms. Inside her room, color exploded on every wall and every surface. Art supplies were filled on every shelf. Paper, paints, pencils, and many used and colorful framed art hung on her wall. Photography photos hung near a vanity close to the window. Pictures of friends and family. There were many photos of family vacations and beautiful destinations. Sitting Saffron inside the window nook, Chloe turned her attention to the many packages on her bed. She started unwrapping her gifts. Inside were many dog supplies. Brushes, dog toys, small clothes, treats, and many more things she would need to train and care for her new pup. After cleaning up the gifts, sorting them away, and thanking her parents once again, Chloe returned to the kitchen upon her mother's call for breakfast. Her father had only made the best and biggest breakfast for her upcoming birthday. Before she left, in the corner of her eye, a small envelope appeared on her bed. Chloe cocked her head, walking to the side of her bed. She lifted the envelope and turned it around, the cover only saying "Happy Birthday." So without hesitation, she swiftly opened the letter. Inside, 3 tickets for a transatlantic cruise, not unlike her parents to hide a surprise trip for the special occasion. She ran downstairs, leaving her puppy to sleep in her bedroom. I can't believe we're going on a cruise! Chloe yelled from the stairs, rushing down to her parents, placing a bottle of orange juice on the table.
What are you talking about, sweetie?
Mrs. Tuffin asked. No need to keep it hidden anymore, Mom, Chloe said, handing the tickets to her mother.
Let me see that, honey.
Mrs. Tuffin said, holding the tickets in her hand.
Your father must have wanted to surprise both of us,
she said. Walking into the kitchen, Mr. Tufton turned to the sink and washed his hands before sitting down at the table.
Thanks for waiting, guys. Feel free to dig in,
he said, passing the orange juice to Chloe. This looks amazing, Dad. Like every year, Chloe said, sitting down in her chair. The table was covered in food. Fluffy pancakes, fresh fruit, crisp bacon, and especially warm eggs.
Dan, dear, Chloe says we're going on a cruise?
Mrs. Tuffin asked.
A cruise? Do you want to take a trip?
Mr. Tuffin said, cocking his eye at the girls. Chloe's eyes furrowed and she crooked her head, lifting the tickets to show her father. I found them in my gifts.
Did you now? A surprise trip for the three of us?
Mr. Tuffin said, looking at his wife.
I don't remember buying this one, so I assumed you did.
Mrs. Tuffin said, picking up a few pancakes and placing them on his plate.
Might have been during one of our late-night wine times. When do we leave, honey?
He asked. Chloe examined the tickets in her hand. My birthday at 8 a.m., she said. Spitting out their drinks, the two parents grabbed the tickets from the table.
Tomorrow?
The Tuffins asked with panicked tones.
Oh, looks like we're gonna need to start packing ASAP,
Mrs. Tuffin said. Chloe dug into her fluffy pancakes and ate a large breakfast. I'm gonna start packing now, Chloe said. Once finished, she headed back upstairs to find Saffron sleeping in the new dog bed she had laid out for her. Opening her closet, she pulled out a large pink suitcase. Opening it, there were still a few socks from her last family trip. Studying the suitcase, she turned her attention to the closet, overflowing with many clothes. Chloe used to think that having a large amount of clothes made it easier to choose when going on vacation. But in all honesty, it made it a lot harder because she could never pick between all the lovely clothes she had. She spent hours dwelling on her clothes, and spending time flipping through the options she could bring on the trip. It made it easier when the trip wasn't a surprise, so she could figure out ahead of time what exactly she could pack before the trip. If it was a hot location, obviously tank tops, loose shirts, loose tops, and things of that nature. Since it was a cruise, she'd have to pick mini swimsuits and loose-fitting outfits so not to get too hot. While wrapped up in packing, Saffron started to whine and sniff around Chloe's room. Do you need to go out, girl? Chloe said, picking up Saffron, who immediately and excitedly started to lick Chloe's arm, wiggling wildly in her arms. Saffron was almost completely white, having a bit of cream on her back and her face. She had large, almost bug-like eyes that seemed much too large for her small face. And unlike most chihuahuas, her ears flopped down in the cutest manner. Chloe cuddled Saffron closely in her arms, walking down the staircase before stopping when she heard the whispers coming from the kitchen.
And you're sure you didn't buy the tickets?
Mr. Tuffin said.
Oh, I'm sure, Dan,
Mrs. Tuffin replied. Chloe stood in the middle of the staircase, quietly leaning down to peek at her parents in the kitchen, who seemed to be having a discussion of some kind. Her parents were close together and their voices were very low. They continued their conversation, not knowing Chloe was eavesdropping. We both know they would try this someday, Mrs. Tuffin said.
It's just too soon. She's a child,
Mr. Tuffin said. Crossing his arm, Mr. Tuffin shook his head.
If we don't go, they may take drastic measures,
Mrs. Tuffin said.
I was just hoping we'd have more time,
Mr. Tuffin replied. It was unusual for her parents to have secret conversations, usually having to deal with surprises and things along those lines. Chloe couldn't help but wonder about her parents' tone and about the conversation they were having. A small whimper came from Saffron, her parents quickly stopping their conversation to look towards the staircase.
Chloe? Is that you, sweetheart?
Mrs. Tuffin asked. Yes, Mom, I'm taking Saffron outside, Chloe said, walking to the front door, dog in hand. She couldn't quite understand why her parents were whispering in the kitchen, especially after the surprise trip was already announced. but decided to ignore it and enjoy her time with her new pet. Chloe and her parents spent the rest of the day packing everything they would need for their trip and having a good time with Saffron. By the end of the day and around dinner time, her parents brought out a beautifully large cake with 15 candles and frosting that said happy birthday. She loved spending time on her birthday with her parents, especially since they always went out of the way to do exactly everything she wanted on her birthday. The night would be followed with movies, popcorn, until she was tucked away in her bed with her new pet, snuggled up and ready for sleep. The next morning came early, almost too early for Chloe's liking. Her parents were punctual people and always liked to be on time. Turning over in her bed, she saw her alarm clock. Waking up at 3 a.m. should be banned, Chloe groaned, picking herself up off the bed. She quickly showered and brushed her teeth before going downstairs to grab a bite to eat for breakfast. After breakfast, she hurried out the door and into the car, where they go to the nearest airport to get on a plane to their next destination. Thankfully, Chloe slept most of the way and was even able to bring Saffron on the plane with her instead of putting her in boarding. Sitting in the parking lot, Chloe could see the docking area ahead that led to a large ship waiting for them. Nothing could have prepared Chloe for just how massive the ship was. It was by far the largest ship she had ever seen. Unbuckling her seatbelt, she hurried out of the car and shut the door behind her, her eyes fixed on the large ship ahead. She was so mesmerized by the ship, her eyes felt like they were popping out of her skull. Chloe ran around to help unload her suitcase and then grabbed Saffron from inside the car. "It's amazing!" Chloe said, walking on the docking area, taking in all of the ship's glory. "Welcome aboard the Conqueror cruise ship," a woman greeted them at the cruise entrance. She wore a white uniform and handed them a flyer. "Please watch your step and have a magical time," she added, winking at Chloe. "We should have taken a cruise sooner."
We should have taken a cruise sooner. Look at all the activities planned,
Mr. Tuffin said, reading from the activity cruise sheet. The three of them, plus their dog, entered the ship, excited and ready to experience everything the Conqueror had to offer.